The shuttle's engines hummed quietly as it approached the massive space station floating in the void between three gas giants. Cadet Sarah Chun pressed her face against the viewport, watching Sunspire Academy grow larger with each passing moment. The station was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, with gleaming white corridors that spiraled outward like the arms of a galaxy. Docking bays dotted its surface like tiny windows, and she could see other shuttles coming and going in perfect choreographed patterns. "First time seeing the Academy?" asked the Zinthri pilot, his forearms working the controls with fluid precision. His blue-scaled face showed what Sarah had learned was amusement among his species. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. She was representing humanity at the most prestigious military academy in the galaxy. Only the best of the best from each species were invited to attend Sunspire Academy, and she was the first human to ever receive an invitation. "You will find it most challenging," the pilot said. "The Academy has trained the greatest warriors in galactic history. The Zinthri Battle Dancers, the Corvin Siege Masters, the Tillian Mind Warriors. All have walked those halls." Sarah nodded, though she noticed he didn't mention any humans. That was nothing new. Humanity had only been part of the Galactic Alliance for 15 years, ever since first contact with the Zinthri exploration fleet. Most species still thought of humans as the newcomers, the primitive species that had barely figured out faster-than-light travel. The shuttle docked with a soft thud, and Sarah gathered her single duffel bag. Everything she owned fit inside it. The Academy provided uniforms, equipment, and housing for all cadets. She followed the pilot through the airlock and into a pristine white corridor that stretched in both directions as far as she could see. "Cadet Chun," a crisp voice called out. Sarah turned to see a tall, thin creature with pale gray skin and enormous black eyes. She recognized the species as Vorthak, known throughout the galaxy for their incredible intelligence and perfect memory. The being wore a dark blue uniform with silver trim, marking him as Academy staff. "Yes, sir," Sarah said, snapping to attention the way she'd been taught during her brief orientation on Earth. "I am Instructor Kethforth. I will escort you to the orientation hall." His voice was calm and measured, but Sarah caught something that might have been curiosity in his large eyes. "You are quite famous here, you know. The first human cadet. Many are interested to see how your species performs." They walked through corridors filled with cadets from dozens of different species. Sarah saw the massive, bear-like Ursani with their thick fur and powerful builds. Groups of insect-like scrix clicked and chittered as they moved in perfect formation. The cat-like Falari moved with fluid grace, their tails swishing as they watched everything with predatory focus. Most of them stared at Sarah as she passed. She was clearly different, shorter than most species, with her brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun, and her pale skin that seemed fragile compared to the scales, fur, and natural armor of the other cadets. She heard whispers in various languages, and her translation implant caught fragments. "Is that the Deathworlder? Looks weak. How did it qualify? Heard their planet has extreme gravity. Maybe that's why it's so short." Sarah kept her expression neutral, but inside she was confused. Deathworlder? Earth had normal gravity, breathable atmosphere, and moderate temperatures. It was actually considered quite pleasant by galactic standards. She made a mental note to ask someone about the term later. The orientation hall was enormous, with curved walls that rose high above them. Hundreds of cadets were already seated in neat rows, organized by species. Sarah noticed she was the only human, which meant she would be sitting alone in her designated section. "Cadet Chun," Instructor Kethforth said quietly, "you will find the Academy challenging in ways your species has never experienced. But do not let that discourage you. Every cadet here has earned their place through excellence." Before Sarah could ask what he meant, a new figure entered the hall. The room fell completely silent. Sarah had never seen this species before. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, with midnight black skin that seemed to absorb light. Its body was humanoid, but clearly built for incredible strength, with muscles that showed even through its formal academy robes. Most striking were its eyes, which glowed a soft purple in the darkness. "I am Commandant Thrax of the Obsidian Collective," the being said, its voice carrying easily through the hall without any amplification. Welcome to Sunspire Academy. For the next 4 years, this station will be your home, your testing ground, and, for some of you, your final resting place. A chill ran through the assembled cadets. Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly. This was clearly not going to be a typical military academy experience. Each of you represents the finest your species has to offer, Commandant Thrax continued. You have been selected not just for your physical capabilities, but for your intelligence, your tactical thinking, and your potential to lead. However, potential means nothing without proof. The Commandant's glowing eyes swept across the assembled cadets. The Academy's methods are intense by necessity. We do not graduate soldiers. We graduate the future defenders of galactic civilization. The threats we face require nothing less than perfection. Sarah noticed several cadets shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The Commandant's presence was intimidating in a way she had never experienced. It was as if the being radiated danger even while standing perfectly still. Your first year will consist of basic combat training, tactical studies, xenobiology, and survival exercises, Thrax said. Those who prove themselves capable will advance to specialized training in their second year. Those who do not will be returned to their homeworlds. The Commandant's gaze seemed to linger on Sarah for a moment. Some of you come from species with little military tradition. Others have been bred for warfare across generations. None of that matters here. At Sunspire Academy, you will be judged solely on your performance. Sarah felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had trained her entire life for this opportunity, but she was starting to realize that everything she thought she knew about the academy might be wrong. The other cadets looked tense, even afraid. This was clearly going to be more than just advanced military training. You will now be escorted to your quarters, the Commandant announced. Tomorrow, your real education begins. Dismissed. As the cadets filed out of the hall in organized groups, Sarah found herself walking alone. The other species seemed to naturally form clusters with their own kind, leaving her to navigate the corridors by herself. She didn't mind. She had always been comfortable with solitude, and it gave her a chance to observe her surroundings more carefully. The quarters section was a maze of curved corridors with doors spaced at regular intervals. Each door had a nameplate written in galactic standard script, along with symbols indicating the species of the occupant. Sarah found her door near the end of a long hallway, far from the clusters of other cadets. Her room was small, but efficient, with a bed that adjusted to accommodate human physiology, a desk with a computer terminal, and a small personal storage area. The walls were the same pristine white as the rest of the station, and a single viewport showed the stars wheeling slowly by as the station rotated. Sarah unpacked her few belongings and sat on the bed, trying to process everything she had experienced. The academy was clearly more intense than she had expected, and the Commandant's words about final resting place were concerning. She had assumed this was advanced military training, not something potentially lethal. A soft chime from her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find a Falari cadet standing in the hallway. The cat-like being had golden fur with black stripes and bright green eyes that seemed to glow in the corridor's lighting. You are the human, the Falari said. It wasn't a question. I am Yaraketh of the Falari hunting clans. I wish to see you before tomorrow's exercises. I'm Sarah, she replied, unsure of the proper protocol. Nice to meet you. Yaraketh tilted her head, studying Sarah with predatory focus. You are smaller than I expected for a Deathworlder. Are all humans so compact? There was that word again. I'm sorry, but what do you mean by Deathworlder? Earth isn't particularly dangerous. The Falari's ears flicked back in what Sarah recognized as surprise. You do not know? Your homeworld is classified as a Class 12 Death World by the Galactic Survey. It is considered one of the most hostile inhabited planets in known space. Sarah stared at her. That's impossible. Earth is perfectly normal. We have plants, animals, oceans, normal weather. Normal weather, Yaraketh repeated slowly. Tell me, human Sarah, what is normal weather on your world? Well, it depends on the region, Sarah said, feeling increasingly confused. Temperatures range from maybe -40 to +50 degrees Celsius. We get rain, snow, wind, occasionally storms. Yaraketh's eyes widened. -40 to +50? And your people survive in such extremes. Of course, We just wear appropriate clothing. Sometimes we need heating or cooling systems, but most inhabited worlds have temperature ranges of perhaps 10 degrees, the Falari interrupted. The fact that your people can survive in conditions that would kill most galactic species is why you are classified as Deathworlders. Sarah felt her worldview shifting. Everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the galaxy was apparently wrong. But we're not particularly strong or fast or tough compared to other species. Are you not? Yaraketh asked. How much does your planet's gravity pull? 1 standard gravity unit, Sarah replied. That's normal, right? The Falari made a sound that might have been laughter. My homeworld has 0.6 standard gravity. Most inhabited worlds range from 0.4 to 0.8. Earth's gravity is considered quite heavy by galactic standards. Before Sarah could respond, another voice called out from down the hallway. Yaraketh, what are you doing bothering the pet human? Sarah turned to see 3 Corvin cadets approaching. The Corvins were a warrior species, standing nearly 2 meters tall with gray skin covered in bony plates. Their leader, marked by additional scarring on his face and arms, looked down at Sarah with obvious disdain. This is Jorik Van, Yaraketh said quietly. He leads the Corvin contingent. So this is humanity's great representative, Jorik Van said, his voice full of mockery. I was expecting something more impressive. You look like you would break if I touched you. Sarah felt anger rising but kept her voice level. Looks can be deceiving. Can they? Jorikvan reached out with one massive hand and poked Sarah in the shoulder. The gesture was clearly meant to intimidate, but Sarah didn't move or flinch. Perhaps you are sturdier than you appear. But tomorrow we begin combat training. We will see how long the Deathworlder lasts against real warriors. The Corvins laughed and continued down the hallway. Yaraketh watched them go, then turned back to Sarah. Jorikvan has never been defeated in combat here. His people have a warrior culture that spans thousands of years. They believe might makes right in all things. And what do you believe? Sarah asked. The Falari's ears flicked forward in what Sarah was learning indicated interest or amusement. I believe tomorrow will be very interesting. Rest well, human Sarah. You will need your strength. After Yaraketh left, Sarah returned to her room and sat at the computer terminal. She accessed the Academy's database and began researching Earth's classification as a death world. What she found made her realize that everything she thought she knew about humanity was completely wrong. Earth wasn't just classified as a death world, it was classified as one of the most extreme death worlds ever discovered. The temperature ranges that seemed normal to her were enough to kill most galactic species within minutes. The gravity that felt perfectly natural to her was crushing by galactic standards. Even the air pressure and oxygen content that allowed her to breathe easily would be toxic to many species. But it wasn't just the environment. Earth's ecosystem was apparently considered terrifyingly hostile. Predators that hunted in packs, parasites that could kill their hosts, bacteria, and viruses that constantly evolved new ways to attack living organisms. Most worlds that supported life were much more stable, with fewer aggressive species and less evolutionary pressure. Humanity had evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill them, and they had not just survived but thrived. No wonder the other cadets looked at her strangely. To them, she was a representative of a species that had been forged by one of the most hostile environments in the galaxy. Sarah closed the database and lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring her first real test at the Academy, and now she understood that the other cadets weren't just seeing her as a newcomer from a primitive species. They were seeing her as something potentially dangerous, a creature shaped by a world that would kill them. She thought about Jorikvan's challenge and smiled slightly. The Corvin warrior had no idea what he was dealing with. None of them did. They saw a small, fragile-looking human and assumed weakness. They had no concept of what it meant to evolve on a world where everything was a potential threat. Tomorrow's combat training would be very interesting indeed. Sarah woke before the Academy's morning alarm, a habit she had developed during her training on Earth. The artificial dawn was gradually brightening through her viewport, simulating a natural sleep cycle. She had slept better than expected, despite the strange environment and the revelations about humanity's classification as Deathworlders. After a quick shower and a meal from the automated food dispenser in her room, Sarah put on the standard academy training uniform. The fabric was some kind of advanced material that adjusted to her body temperature and provided protection without restricting movement. It felt strange after years of wearing Earth military gear, but she had to admit it was comfortable. The corridor outside her room was already bustling with activity as cadets made their way to the morning assembly. Sarah fell in with the flow of beings, noting how the different species naturally organized themselves. The Corvins moved in tight military formations, while the Falari seemed to glide through the crowds individually. The Zinthari worked together in perfect coordination, and the insect-like Scrix moved as if they were parts of a single organism. The assembly hall was the same enormous space where they had met Commandant Thrax the previous evening. This morning, however, the floor had been reconfigured into a series of training areas. Sarah could see combat circles, obstacle courses, and what appeared to be weapon racks filled with equipment she didn't recognize. Attention! The voice belonged to a new instructor, a member of a species Sarah hadn't seen before. The being was roughly humanoid, but covered in what looked like living metal that shifted and flowed as it moved. I am Combat Instructor Zex Prime. Today begins your evaluation in basic combat skills. The assembled cadets snapped to attention with varying degrees of precision. Sarah noticed that the military species like the Corvins and Zinthari moved with perfect synchronization, while some of the others seemed less practiced at formal military behavior. You will be divided into groups based on your physical capabilities and training backgrounds, Zex Prime continued. Each group will rotate through different exercises designed to test your current skill levels. This is not a competition. This is an assessment. Sarah found herself assigned to a group with several other cadets from species she didn't recognize. Looking around, she realized this was probably the mixed capabilities group, species that didn't have obvious military traditions or physical advantages. She was the only human, but she was used to that by now. Their first station was basic hand-to-hand combat. The instructor, a compact Falari with battle scars across his muzzle, demonstrated basic strikes and defensive positions. Sarah followed along, noting that the techniques were similar to human martial arts, but adapted for beings with different body structures. You, the instructor said, pointing at Sarah. Human, show me a basic defensive stance. Sarah dropped into a standard Earth military combat position, weight balanced, hands ready to block or strike. The instructor circled her, examining her posture with professional interest. Interesting, he muttered. Your center of gravity is very low for your height, and your stance suggests you are accustomed to fighting opponents larger than yourself. Most opponents on Earth are larger than me, Sarah replied. It's not unusual. Indeed. The instructor turned to address the group. Notice how the human positions herself. She assumes her opponent will have advantages in reach and possibly strength. Her stance prioritizes mobility and defensive options over pure aggression. Sarah felt the other cadets studying her more carefully now. She wasn't sure if this attention was good or bad, but it was certainly making her stand out more than she would have preferred. The next rotation was weapons familiarization. The Academy used standardized energy weapons that could be adjusted for different species capabilities. Sarah picked up the weapon assigned to her group and was surprised by how light it felt. The Earth-made firearms she had trained with were much heavier. This weapon fires concentrated plasma bursts, the weapons instructor explained. She was Zinthari, with the characteristic blue scales, and for arms that allowed her to demonstrate multiple firing positions simultaneously. Safety protocols are built in to prevent lethal injuries during training, but you will still feel significant pain if struck. They began with basic marksmanship at stationary targets. Sarah sighted down the weapon's barrel, trying to adjust for the different feel and balance compared to Earth weapons. Her first shot went wide, missing the target completely. Several cadets from other groups turned to look, and she heard what sounded like mocking laughter from the Corvin section. Concentrate on your breathing, the instructor advised. This weapon responds to minute muscle movements. Tension will throw off your aim. Sarah took a deep breath and tried to relax. Her second shot hit the outer ring of the target. Better, but still not impressive. She could feel the other cadets watching her struggle with what seemed to be basic skills. By her 10th shot, however, something clicked. Sarah began to understand the weapon's particular characteristics and how to compensate for them. Her next 5 shots clustered near the center of the target, and by the end of the exercise, she was consistently hitting the bullseye. Much improved, the instructor noted. You adapt quickly once you understand the principles involved. The third rotation was physical fitness testing. This was where Sarah expected to struggle the most, given that she was surrounded by species that had evolved for different physical capabilities. The test began with a simple endurance run around a track that circled the entire training floor. Sarah started at a moderate pace, not wanting to burn out early. Around her, the other cadets took off at various speeds. The Falari moved with fluid grace, their feline builds perfectly suited for sustained running. The Corvins powered forward with determination, their heavy builds making up in strength what they lacked in elegance. As the laps progressed, Sarah noticed something interesting. While many of the other cadets had started strong, they were beginning to slow down. The Falari, built for short bursts of speed, were starting to struggle with the sustained effort. Even some of the Corvins were beginning to breathe heavily. Sarah, meanwhile, felt like she was just getting warmed up. Years of training on Earth, where she had to run in varying weather conditions and terrain, had given her endurance that she hadn't realized was unusual. She gradually increased her pace, passing cadets who were slowing down. By the final lap, Sarah was running with the leading group, keeping pace with species that were supposedly built for physical performance. When the exercise ended, she wasn't even breathing hard, while many of the others were clearly exhausted. Interesting, muttered the physical fitness instructor, a massive Ursani whose fur was dampened with sweat from demonstrating the exercises. The human shows unexpected endurance capabilities. The final rotation was tactical problem-solving. Groups of cadets were presented with holographic scenarios and asked to develop solutions using limited resources. Sarah found herself working with 2 Vorthack cadets, whose species was known for incredible intelligence, and a single Tillian, whose people were famous for their psychic abilities. The scenario was a rescue mission on a hostile world. Their team had to extract survivors from a crashed ship while avoiding detection by enemy forces. Sarah studied the holographic display, noting the terrain, enemy patrol patterns, and potential extraction routes. The logical approach is to wait for the enemy patrol to move to its farthest point, then proceed directly to the crash site, one of the Vorthack cadets suggested. Mathematical analysis shows this gives us the highest probability of success. I can sense there are complications not shown in the basic scenario, the Tillian added. There are additional hostile forces that will complicate a direct approach. Sarah continued studying the display, but she was thinking about something else entirely. What if we don't avoid the enemy? She said suddenly. The other 3 cadets looked at her in surprise. Explain, one of the Vorthacks said. Look at the patrol pattern. Sarah pointed to the holographic enemies. They're following a set route, but it takes them away from their base for extended periods. If we attack the patrol when they're farthest from support, we eliminate the threat and create a distraction that draws attention away from the crash site. That plan involves direct combat, the Tillian said. Our mission parameters prioritize stealth. Sometimes the best stealth is eliminating the Watchers, Sarah replied. On Earth, we call it aggressive reconnaissance. You remove threats proactively instead of trying to sneak around them. The Vorthack cadets exchanged glances. The human's approach is more violent than optimal, but the tactical reasoning is sound. By eliminating the patrol, we also gain intelligence about enemy capabilities and communication patterns. They developed a plan combining elements of all their suggestions. The Tillian would use psychic abilities to detect hidden threats. The Vorthack would calculate optimal timing and routes, and Sarah would plan the actual combat engagement. When they presented their solution, the tactical instructor, a scarred veteran of a species she didn't recognize, nodded approvingly. Effective combination of species capabilities, he noted. The human's contribution shows understanding of aggressive tactics that complement the other's specialties. As the morning training session ended, Sarah found herself walking back to the quarters area alone again. She had performed better than expected in most areas, but she wasn't sure if that was good or bad. Standing out at a military academy could be either a sign of excellence or a target for trouble. Human, a voice called out behind her. Sarah turned to see Jorik Vin approaching with his usual group of Corvin followers. I watched your performance today. You are not as weak as you appear. Thank you, Sarah said carefully, unsure if this was actually a compliment. Do not thank me yet, Jorikven said. Tomorrow we begin actual combat training. Running in circles and shooting at targets is nothing. When you face a real warrior in battle, your endurance will not save you. I guess we'll find out, Sarah replied. The Corvin laughed. Yes, we will. I look forward to teaching you the difference between Deathworld survival and actual combat skill. After the Corvins left, Sarah made her way to the Academy's library, a vast digital repository that contained information about every known species and their military traditions. She wanted to understand what she was really facing. The Corvins, she learned, had been perfecting their warrior culture for over 5,000 years. They began combat training as children and considered dying in battle to be the highest honor. Their physical capabilities included dense bone structure, redundant organs, and the ability to fight effectively even with serious injuries. The Falari were ambush predators who had adapted their hunting instincts for warfare. They were incredibly fast and agile, with reflexes that allowed them to react to threats faster than most species could even perceive them. The Zinthari had evolved on a world with multiple sentient species, giving them unparalleled experience in cooperative tactics and multi-species coordination. They thought and moved as unified groups, making them devastating in team-based combat. Every species represented at the Academy had some kind of military advantage that had been developed over thousands of years. Humanity, by contrast, had only been aware of galactic civilization for 15 years. But, as Sarah researched, she began to understand that humanity had something the others didn't. Every other species had evolved on worlds that were relatively stable and predictable. They had developed their military capabilities to fight others of their own species or species from similar environments. Humans had evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill them in new and creative ways. They hadn't just developed the ability to fight other humans. They had developed the ability to survive anything their environment could throw at them. And Earth's environment was apparently more hostile than anything most galactic species could imagine. Sarah closed the database and made her way to the Academy's observation deck, a large area with transparent walls that offered a view of the surrounding space. She could see the three gas giants that Sunspire Academy orbited, their colorful atmospheres swirling in patterns that were mesmerizing to watch. As she stood there, she noticed she wasn't alone. Yaraketh was at the far end of the observation deck, also watching the gas giants slowly rotate. Admiring the view? Sarah asked, walking over to join the Falari. Thinking, Yaraketh replied. Today's training was interesting. You performed better than most expected. I'm still learning how everything works here, Sarah said. The weapons are different, the tactics are different, even the way people think about combat is different. But you adapt quickly, Yaraketh observed. That is a useful trait in a warrior. Are you a warrior? Sarah asked. I mean, I know the Falari are predators, but do your people have a military tradition? Yaraketh's ears flicked in amusement. We are hunters. We stalk our prey, learn their weaknesses, and strike when the moment is perfect. It is not the same as the Corvin warrior culture, but it is effective. And what do you hunt? Sarah asked. Depends on what needs hunting, Yaraketh replied. Sometimes it is food. Sometimes it is threats to the pride. Sometimes it is enemies of our people. She turned to look at Sarah with those bright green eyes. What do humans hunt? Sarah thought about the question. Everything, I guess. We started as persistence hunters, chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. But we learned to hunt anything that threatened us or that we needed to survive. On Earth, if it exists, somebody has probably figured out how to hunt it. Everything, Yaraketh repeated thoughtfully. That explains much about your performance today. You approach each challenge as something to be hunted and overcome. Before Sarah could respond, an announcement echoed through the observation deck. All first-year cadets report to quarters. Lights out in 30 minutes. Tomorrow's training begins at 0600 Academy Standard Time. As they walked back toward the quarters section, Yaraketh spoke quietly. Sarah of the humans, tomorrow will be different from today. Combat training here is not simulation. The Academy believes that warriors must experience real risk to develop true skills. What do you mean by real risk? Sarah asked. The weapons will not be set to training mode. Yaraketh replied. The safety protocols will be reduced. Some cadets are injured during combat training. Some are even killed. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. They let cadets kill each other? Not intentionally, Yaraketh said. But accidents happen when beings trained for violence use real weapons in stressful situations. The Academy considers it acceptable losses for the greater good of producing elite warriors. They had reached the junction where their quarters diverged. Yaraketh paused before heading down her corridor. Be careful tomorrow, Sarah of the humans. Jorikvin is not just boasting when he talks about his combat abilities. He has seriously injured 3 opponents since arriving at the Academy, and I believe he considers you a personal challenge. After Yaraketh left, Sarah made her way to her room and sat on her bed, processing what she had learned. Tomorrow wasn't just going to be advanced combat training. It was going to be potentially lethal combat with live weapons and reduced safety protocols. She thought about Jorikvin's attitude and realized he probably saw defeating the human as a way to prove his species' superiority. If Yaraketh was right about his combat record, he had the skills to make good on his threats. But, as Sarah prepared for sleep, she found herself feeling more excited than afraid. For the first time since arriving at the Academy, she would be facing a challenge that was similar to what she had trained for on Earth. Real combat with real consequences was something humanity had been doing for millions of years. Tomorrow, the other cadets would learn what it really meant to be a Deathworlder. The morning alarm at Sunspire Academy was different from the previous day. Instead of the gentle artificial dawn, a harsh klaxon sounded throughout the quarters section, followed by an announcement in multiple languages. All first-year cadets report to Combat Arena 7 immediately. Full combat gear required. Medical teams are standing by. Sarah was already awake, having spent much of the night thinking about Yaraketh's warnings. The mention of medical teams standing by confirmed that today's training would indeed involve real danger. She quickly dressed in the reinforced combat uniform that had been delivered to her room during the night, along with protective gear that looked far more serious than yesterday's training equipment. The corridor outside was filled with cadets moving with unusual urgency. Gone was the casual chatter and species-based grouping from previous mornings. Today, everyone seemed focused and tense. Sarah noticed that many of the cadets were carrying personal weapons or equipment that hadn't been present during yesterday's training. Combat Arena 7 was located in a different section of the Academy than the previous day's training areas. Sarah followed the flow of cadets through corridors that gradually became more utilitarian and less decorative. The walls changed from pristine white to a darker, more practical material that looked like it could withstand significant damage. The arena itself was enormous, easily large enough to hold several football fields. The floor was made of some kind of adaptive material that could be reconfigured into different terrain types. Today it was set up as an urban combat environment, with buildings, streets, and obstacles that created a complex three-dimensional battlefield. Around the arena's perimeter, Sarah could see observation decks filled with Academy staff and what appeared to be senior cadets from higher years. The atmosphere felt more like a gladiatorial arena than a training facility. Attention! Commandant Thrax's voice boomed across the arena, and every cadet snapped to attention. The massive being stood at the center of the arena, his black skin seeming to absorb the light around him, and his purple eyes glowing with intensity. Today begins your introduction to real combat, the Commandant announced. Until now, you have been playing games with training weapons and safety protocols. That ends now. Today, you will fight with live weapons under conditions designed to simulate actual battlefield stress. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. Around her, the other cadets stood perfectly still, but she could sense the tension radiating from the group. You will be divided into teams of 4, Thrax continued. Each team will face a series of combat scenarios with increasing difficulty. Some of you will be injured. Some may die. This is acceptable and necessary for your development as warriors. The casual way he mentioned death sent a chill through Sarah. This was clearly not the kind of military training she had experienced on Earth, where safety was always the primary concern. Teams are assigned based on combat assessments from yesterday's training, the Commandant said. When your team name is called, proceed to your designated staging area. Sarah listened as teams were announced, noting the composition. Most teams seem to be balanced combinations of different species capabilities: a Corvin for heavy assault, a Falari for reconnaissance, a Zinthri for coordination, and a support specialist from another species. Team 7. Yaraketh of the Falari, Jorik Vin of the Corvins, Zixthek of the Zinthri, and Sarah Chun of the humans. Sarah felt her stomach drop. She was teamed with Jorik Vin, the Corvin who had been openly hostile toward her since her arrival. This was either very bad luck or a deliberate choice by the Academy staff. As she made her way to the staging area, Sarah caught Yaraketh's eye. The Falari's expression was unreadable, but her ears were flicked back in what Sarah had learned indicated concern or displeasure. Jorik Vin was already at the staging area, checking a massive weapon that looked like it could punch holes through armored vehicles. He looked up as Sarah approached and grinned, showing teeth that looked uncomfortably sharp. "How convenient," he said. "Now I can see how the Deathworlder performs in real combat without having to wait for a formal challenge." "We're supposed to be on the same team," Sarah pointed out. "Teams can change quickly in real combat," Jorik Vin replied. "Perhaps you will be injured early and need to withdraw. Perhaps you will prove that humans are not suited for real warfare." Before Sarah could respond, Zixthek arrived. The Zinthri was shorter than Sarah had expected, with the characteristic blue scales and for arms that marked their species. Like all Zinthri, Zixthek moved with a fluid grace that suggested perfect body control. "Team dynamics appear suboptimal," Zixthek observed, looking between Sarah and Jorik Vin. "Internal conflict will reduce mission effectiveness." "There will be no conflict if the human knows her place," Jorik Vin said. Yaraketh arrived last, her feline features set in a neutral expression that gave away nothing of her thoughts. "Our first scenario is urban assault," she reported. "We must capture and hold a strategic building while defending against counterattacks." "Standard assault pattern," Jorik Vin said immediately. "I will lead the frontal attack, supported by covering fire from the human. The Zinthri will coordinate our movements, and the Falari will scout for threats." Sarah studied the tactical display showing their target building. It was a 3-story structure with multiple entry points and numerous positions that could be used for defense or ambush. "What about rear security?" she asked. "If we all focus on the frontal assault, we're vulnerable to flanking attacks." "Deathworlders always think about defense," Jorik Vin scoffed. "True warriors focus on aggressive offense." "Dead warriors focus on nothing at all," Sarah replied. "On Earth, we have a saying: no plan survives contact with the enemy. We need to be prepared for things to go wrong." Zixthek's 4 eyes focused on Sarah with interest. "Explain your tactical assessment." Sarah pointed to the display. "The building has excellent sight lines in 3 directions, but there's a blind spot on the eastern approach. If enemy forces use that route for a counterattack while we're focused on taking the building, we could be trapped inside. The human's analysis shows merit," Zixthek said after a moment. "Zinthri tactical doctrine also emphasizes maintaining retreat options during assault operations." Jorik Vin looked annoyed but didn't argue further. "Fine. The human can watch the rear. At least that way she will be out of the way when real fighting begins." Their weapons and equipment were distributed next. Sarah received a standard Galactic assault rifle, similar to what she had trained with the day before, but clearly configured for lethal rather than training use. She also got a sidearm, tactical armor, and a communications device that would keep her linked to her team. As they prepared to enter the arena, an academy instructor approached their group. Sarah recognized him as one of the senior staff from the previous day's briefings. "Team 7, he said formally. "Your scenario involves an enemy force of approximately 20 combatants defending the target building. They are armed with standard weapons and have had time to prepare defensive positions. Medical evacuation will be provided for serious injuries, but you should assume that no help is coming during the actual exercise." "20 enemies?" Sarah asked. "Against 4 of us?" The instructor's expression didn't change. "Real combat rarely involves fair odds, Cadet Chun. Elite warriors are expected to overcome superior numbers through superior skill and tactics." As they entered the arena, Sarah could feel hundreds of eyes watching from the observation decks. This was clearly as much a spectacle as it was training, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that many of the observers were hoping to see the human fail dramatically. The urban environment was incredibly realistic. The buildings felt solid, the streets were littered with debris that provided cover and obstacles, and the lighting created shadows that could hide attackers. Sarah could even smell what seemed like smoke and concrete dust, adding to the immersive experience. Enemy positions confirmed, Yaraketh reported through their communications system. She had moved ahead to scout while the others planned their approach. Multiple defenders on each floor of the target building, with additional forces in surrounding structures for crossfire support. Numbers? Zixtek asked. At least 15 visible, probably more concealed. Heavy weapons on the roof and second-floor windows. Jorikvin shouldered his massive weapon. Direct assault through the main entrance. We overwhelmed them with superior firepower. That's suicide, Sarah said immediately. They'll cut us down before we reach the building. Do you have a better idea, Deathworlder? Jorikvin asked mockingly. Sarah studied the tactical situation, drawing on years of Earth military training and the human instinct for survival in hostile environments. Yes, actually. We create multiple problems for them simultaneously. She outlined her plan quickly. Yaraketh would use her natural stealth abilities to approach the building from the blind spot Sarah had identified earlier. Zixtek would coordinate a diversionary attack from the front, making noise and drawing attention but staying in cover. Jorikvin would use his heavy weapon to suppress the roof-mounted defenders, preventing them from supporting the ground floor. And what will you do while we take all the risks? Jorikvin asked. I'm going through the building next door and across the rooftops, Sarah replied. While you keep them focused on the obvious approaches, I'll get into position to attack from above. That building is 40 meters away from the target, Zixtek observed. How do you plan to cross that distance? Sarah smiled. I'm going to jump. The others stared at her. Humans cannot jump 40 meters, Jorikvin said. Not straight up, no? But with a running start and the right trajectory, I can make it across. Earth's gravity is heavier than Academy standard. I've been training in what feels like low gravity to me my entire time here. Yaraketh's ears flicked forward with interest. The human may be correct. Deathworld gravity would significantly enhance jumping capability in Academy standard conditions. Before anyone could argue further, the exercise began. Enemy fire immediately erupted from the target building, forcing them to take cover behind a damaged vehicle in the street. Sarah could hear the distinctive whine of energy weapons and the sharp crack of projectiles hitting the ground around them. Much for planning, Jorikvin growled, returning fire with his heavy weapon. Now we fight. The next few minutes were chaos. Jorikvin laid down suppressing fire while Zixtek coordinated their movements and called out enemy positions. Yaraketh vanished into the shadows, moving toward her assigned infiltration route with feline grace. Sarah broke away from the group and sprinted toward the adjacent building, keeping low and using cover to avoid the worst of the enemy fire. Several energy blasts passed close enough that she could feel the heat, but her smaller size and erratic movement pattern made her a difficult target. The adjacent building was 3 stories tall with a fire escape that let her quickly reach the roof. From there, she could see the entire tactical situation laid out below her. The enemy defenders were positioned exactly as she had expected, focused on the obvious approach routes and not watching for threats from unexpected directions. The gap between buildings looked larger from ground level, but Sarah had calculated the physics correctly. With Academy standard gravity being lighter than Earth normal, she had significantly more jumping ability than any galactic species would expect. She backed up to get a running start, then sprinted toward the edge of the roof. For a moment she was airborne, sailing through space with the arena floor far below her. Then she landed hard on the target building's roof, rolling to absorb the impact and coming up behind the heavy weapons position. The 2 defenders manning the roof-mounted weapon were so focused on Jorikvin's suppressing fire that they never saw her coming. Sarah disabled both of them with quick, precise strikes that would have been lethal in real combat, but were designed to incapacitate rather than kill in the training exercise. Roof secure, she reported through the communication system. Beginning descent. What followed was the kind of close-quarters combat that Sarah had trained for extensively on Earth. The building's interior was a maze of rooms and corridors, with enemy defenders positioned to cover the most likely approaches. But They weren't prepared for someone attacking from above and behind. Sarah moved through the building methodically, using her smaller size and natural agility to navigate obstacles that would slow down larger species. Her Earth military training had emphasized adaptation and improvisation, skills that proved invaluable in the unpredictable environment of urban combat. By the time Yaraketh reached her assigned position and Jorikvin began his frontal assault, Sarah had already neutralized more than half of the defenders. The remaining enemies found themselves caught between multiple threats, unable to maintain their defensive positions. The exercise ended with their team successfully capturing and holding the target building. As the simulation powered down and the arena lights returned to normal, Sarah found herself breathing hard but exhilarated. This had been real combat, with real stakes, and she had not just survived but excelled. Impressive performance, Team 7, announced the instructor over the arena's communication system. Report to debriefing area for tactical analysis. As they walked toward the debriefing area, Jorikvin was unusually quiet. Finally, he spoke. The roof jump was unexpected. Thank you, Sarah replied. I did not say it was good, Jorikvin said quickly. Only unexpected. Perhaps Deathworld reflexes have some applications in combat. It wasn't exactly praise, but Sarah recognized it as the closest thing to respect she was likely to get from the Corvin warrior. More importantly, she had proven to herself and her team that humanity belonged at Sunspire Academy. But as they entered the debriefing area, Sarah noticed Commandant Thrax watching her with those unsettling purple eyes. His expression was unreadable, but she had the uncomfortable feeling that her performance had attracted exactly the kind of attention she had been hoping to avoid. The real test, she realized, was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since the first live combat exercise, and Sarah had begun to settle into the brutal rhythm of life at Sunspire Academy. Each day brought new challenges designed to push the cadets beyond their limits. Combat scenarios, survival exercises, tactical planning sessions, and weapons training filled every waking hour. Sarah's performance continued to surprise both instructors and fellow cadets. Her combination of earth-honed survival instincts, adaptive thinking, and unexpected physical capabilities had made her a valuable team member despite her human origins. Even Jorikvin had grudgingly begun to show something resembling respect, though he still made occasional comments about Deathworld luck. This morning was different, however. Instead of the usual early alarm, Sarah was awakened by a soft chime from her room's communication panel. A message waited for her, marked with the Academy's highest priority designation. Cadet Chun, report to Commandant Thrax's office at 0800 hours. Come alone. Bring full combat gear. Sarah checked the time. She had exactly 30 minutes to prepare. The instruction to bring combat gear was unusual for a meeting with the Commandant, and the emphasis on coming alone made her nervous. Had she done something wrong? Or was this about something else entirely? She dressed quickly in her academy uniform and gathered her combat equipment, including the personal sidearm that all cadets were now authorized to carry after passing their weapons qualifications. The corridors were empty at this early hour, giving the academy an eerie, deserted feeling that was very different from its usual bustling activity. Commandant Thrax's office was located in the Academy's Central Command section, an area Sarah had never visited before. The corridors here were wider and more impressive than the cadet quarters, with walls decorated with weapons and battle standards from dozens of different galactic civilizations. The office itself was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows that provided a spectacular view of the 3 gas giants around which Sunspire Academy orbited. Commandant Thrax stood with his back to the door, his imposing silhouette framed against the swirling colors of the nearest planet's atmosphere. Cadet Chun reporting as ordered, sir, Sarah announced formally. At ease, Cadet, Thrax replied without turning around. Tell me, what do you know about the Academy's true purpose? The question caught Sarah off guard. Sir, the Academy trains elite military officers for service in the Galactic Alliance Defense Force. That is what we tell the member worlds, Thrax said, finally, turning to face her. His purple eyes seemed to glow more intensely in the subdued lighting of his office. But it is only part of the truth. The complete truth is far more complex and far more dangerous. Sarah waited silently, knowing that the Commandant would explain when he was ready. The Galactic Alliance faces threats that cannot be publicly acknowledged, Thrax continued. There are species in the Outer Rim territories that have not joined the Alliance voluntarily. Some have been persuaded. Others have been eliminated entirely. And there are threats from beyond our galaxy that most Alliance citizens cannot even imagine. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. This sounded like the Academy was involved in activities that went far beyond normal military training. Sunspire Academy does indeed train military officers, the Commandant said. But our primary purpose is to create specialists capable of handling the Alliance's most sensitive operations. Assassination, sabotage, genocide when necessary, and first contact with hostile alien species. Sarah felt her world shifting. Sir, are you saying that the Academy trains assassins? Among other things, yes, Thrax replied matter-of-factly. The Alliance maintains peace through careful application of directed violence. Most species in the galaxy are peaceful by nature, content with their stable worlds and predictable lives. But sometimes, more aggressive measures are required. Where do humans fit into this? Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. Thrax smiled, an expression that was somehow more frightening than his usual stern demeanor. Humans, Cadet Chen, are the most naturally violent species the Alliance has ever encountered. Your entire evolutionary history is a catalog of warfare, predation, and survival against impossible odds. You have developed killing techniques that most galactic species cannot even comprehend. Sarah thought about Earth's history of warfare and had to admit he had a point. Humans had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing other humans, developing weapons and tactics that were incredibly sophisticated even by galactic standards. But it goes beyond simple violence, the Commandant continued. Humans possess something that is extremely rare in the galaxy, the ability to kill without remorse when circumstances require it. Most species are naturally cooperative and peaceful. Even our most aggressive warriors, like the Corvins, fight according to strict honor codes that limit their effectiveness. And humans don't. Sarah asked. Humans will do whatever it takes to survive and protect what they value, Thrax said. Your people's concept of total war is something that most galactic species find incomprehensible and terrifying. The ability to set aside moral constraints when facing existential threats is exactly what the Alliance needs for its most difficult operations. Sarah felt a mix of pride and horror. Was this why she had been invited to the Academy? Not for her individual abilities, but because humans were seen as natural killers? I have been watching your performance carefully, the Commandant said. Your tactical thinking, your adaptability, and especially your willingness to take lethal action when necessary. You have all the qualities we look for in our most elite operatives. What exactly are you offering me? Sarah asked. Advanced training in what we call applied violence, Thrax replied. You would leave the standard cadet program and join a much smaller, more selective group. The training is far more intense, and the missions you would eventually undertake are far more dangerous. But the resources and capabilities you would gain access to are beyond anything available to regular Alliance military forces. Sarah thought about the implications. What kind of missions? Recently, we discovered evidence of a previously unknown species in the Outer Rim, the Commandant said. They appear to be extremely aggressive and technologically advanced. Standard Alliance diplomatic protocols have failed completely. In fact, several diplomatic missions have simply vanished without a trace. He activated a holographic display showing a star map with several systems marked in red. These are the systems where we have lost contact with Alliance outposts. The pattern suggests a systematic campaign of expansion by this unknown species. And you want me to what exactly? Single-handedly stop an invasion? Sarah asked. Nothing so dramatic. Thrax replied with another unsettling smile. We want you to be part of a team that investigates these systems and determines the nature of the threat. If possible, you would attempt to establish communication. If necessary, you would eliminate key targets to disrupt their expansion. Sarah stared at the star map, trying to process what she was being told. This was far beyond anything she had expected when she came to the Academy. Why me specifically? There are other cadets who have performed well. Because you are human, the Commandant said simply. The other species represented here are excellent warriors within their own paradigms. But humans are the only species that consistently develops effective solutions to completely novel threats. Your people's history of adaptation and survival gives you capabilities that cannot be taught to other species. What if I refuse? Sarah asked. Then you continue with the standard program and graduate as a regular Alliance officer, Thrax replied. Your performance has been excellent, and you would have a successful military career. But you would never know what you might have accomplished with proper training and resources. Sarah considered her options. The standard academy program was challenging enough, and she had been looking forward to a normal military career serving the Alliance. But the opportunity to be part of something bigger, to really make a difference in galactic security, was tempting. How many other cadets have been offered this opportunity? She asked. From your class? You would be the first, the Commandant replied. Applied violence operatives are extremely rare. Currently, there are fewer than 50 active operatives in the entire galaxy. And how many of them are human? Thrax paused before answering. You would be the first human to join the program. Until recently, the Alliance leadership was not convinced that humans possessed the necessary reliability for such sensitive work. Sarah realized this was a test not just of her individual capabilities, but of humanity's potential role in galactic security. Her performance would determine whether other humans would be offered similar opportunities in the future. I need time to think about this, she said finally. Of course, the Commandant replied. But not too much time. Events in the Outer Rim are accelerating, and we may need to deploy a team within the next few months. If you are interested, training would begin immediately. As Sarah prepared to leave, Thrax called out one final comment. Cadet Chen, I should mention that if you accept this opportunity, your association with your current team and classmates will necessarily end. Applied violence operatives maintain complete operational security. You would not be able to discuss your training or missions with anyone outside the program. Sarah nodded and left the office, her mind racing with implications and possibilities. As she walked back through the corridors toward the cadet quarters, she realized that her time at Sunspire Academy had been leading to this moment from the very beginning. The academy wasn't just a military training facility. It was a recruitment and evaluation center for the Alliance's most secret and most dangerous operations. And somehow, despite being the first human ever to attend, she had caught the attention of the people who ran those operations. When she reached her quarters, Sarah found Yaraketh waiting in the corridor outside her door. The Falari's ears were flicked back in a position that Sarah had learned indicated serious concern. You were summoned to see the Commandant, Yaraketh said. It wasn't a question. How did you know? Sarah asked. Your absence from morning formation was noticed, the Falari replied. And meetings with the Commandant at this hour usually mean only one thing, which is, Yaraketh looked around to make sure they were alone in the corridor. The same thing happened to my cousin 3 years ago. She was an exceptional student, top of her class in combat training and tactical analysis. Then, she had a private meeting with Commandant Thrax, and the next day she was gone from the academy. Gone? Sarah asked. You mean she was expelled? No, Yaraketh said quietly. She graduated early to a special program. I received one message from her afterward, saying that she could not discuss her new assignment, but that she was well. That was 3 years ago. I have heard nothing from her since. Sarah felt a chill. What do you think happened to her? I think the academy has purposes beyond what they tell us, Yaraketh replied. And I think exceptional cadets are sometimes recruited for activities that require complete secrecy. Before Sarah could respond, the morning alarms sounded throughout the quarters section. Around them, cadets began emerging from their rooms and heading toward the assembly areas for the day's training. Think carefully about whatever you were offered, Yaraketh said as she prepared to join the flow of cadets. Some opportunities come with prices that are not immediately apparent. As Sarah watched her friend disappear into the crowd of cadets, she realized that her decision would affect not just her own future, but potentially the future of human involvement in galactic affairs. The Academy's dark secret was that it trained more than military officers. It trained the Alliance's most secret weapons. And now they wanted her to become one of them. Sarah spent the next 2 days in a state of internal conflict. weighing Commandant Thrax's offer against Yaraketha's warnings. She went through the motions of normal academy life, attending classes, participating in training exercises, studying in the library, but her mind was focused on the impossible decision she had to make. On the third morning, she made her choice. Sarah found herself standing outside the Commandant's office again, this time by her own decision rather than summons. The same imposing corridors and battle standards surrounded her, but now they felt different, more like glimpses into a world she was about to enter than intimidating displays of power. "Cadet Chun," Commandant Thrax said as she entered his office. "I trust you have reached a decision." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied. "I accept your offer." The Commandant nodded as if he had never doubted her choice. "Excellent. Your training begins immediately. Gather your personal belongings and report to Transport Bay 7 in 1 hour. Everything else you need will be provided." "Sir, what do I tell my teammates?" "They'll notice when I disappear." "You will tell them nothing," Thrax replied firmly. "As far as they will know, you have been selected for advanced individual training at another facility. This is partially true and requires no deception on your part." An hour later, Sarah found herself in a shuttle far more advanced than the transport that had brought her to Sunspire Academy. The pilot was a species she didn't recognize, and he spoke only to confirm her identity before launching them into space. Through the viewport, she watched the Academy growing smaller until it was just another point of light among the stars. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Training Facility Omega," the pilot replied. "You will find it quite different from the Academy." He was right. Training Facility Omega was located inside a hollowed-out asteroid that had been completely converted into a military installation. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than a large piece of space rock drifting in an empty system far from any inhabited worlds. But the interior was a maze of training areas, laboratories, and living quarters that made Sunspire Academy look quaint by comparison. Sarah was met at the docking bay by another human. "Cadet Chun," the woman said with a smile. "I'm Agent Martinez, but you can call me Elena. I'm here to show you around and help you get oriented." Sarah stared at the first human she had seen since leaving Earth months ago. Elena was older, probably in her 30s, with the kind of lean, efficient build that spoke of years of physical training. But it was her eyes that caught Sarah's attention. They had the flat, calculating expression of someone who had seen and done things that most people couldn't imagine. "You're human," Sarah said, then immediately felt stupid for stating the obvious. "I am," Elena replied. "And before you ask, yes, I graduated from Sunspire Academy. 4 years ago, actually. I was offered the same choice you just accepted." As they walked through the facility's corridors, Elena explained the training program. "Applied violence operatives need skills that go far beyond conventional military training. We learn xenobiology, advanced weapons systems, infiltration techniques, psychological warfare, and about 50 other specialties that don't officially exist." The facility was much smaller than the academy, but far more intense. Sarah saw training areas designed to simulate environments from dozens of different world types, weapons ranges that used actual military-grade equipment, and laboratories where she could see beings working with technology that looked decades ahead of anything she had seen before. "How many humans are in the program?" Sarah asked. "Currently, just me," Elena replied. "You'll be the second. The Alliance has been hesitant to recruit humans for this kind of work because they weren't sure we could be trusted with their deepest secrets." "And can we?" Sarah asked. Elena paused in front of a viewport showing the stark beauty of the asteroid field surrounding them. "That depends on how you define trust, I suppose. The Alliance wants operatives who will follow orders without question and never reveal classified information. By that definition, yes, we can be trusted. And by other definitions? Humans have a habit of making their own moral judgments about the missions they're given," Elena said. "Sometimes that leads to complications." Before Sarah could ask for clarification, they were approached by another being. This one was clearly the same species as Commandant Thrax, with the same midnight black skin and glowing purple eyes, but smaller and more compact. "Agent Martinez," the being said formally. "Is this the new recruit?" "Yes, sir," Elena replied. "Cadet Chun, this is Director Vex Prime. He runs the Applied Violence Program. Welcome to Omega Facility, Cadet Chun," Director Vex Prime said. I trust Agent Martinez has begun to explain what you will be learning here. She has, sir, Sarah replied. I'm ready to begin training. Excellent. Your first assignment is to study the classified files on the Outer Rim situation that Commandant Thrax mentioned. You need to understand exactly what kind of threat we are facing. The classified files were far more disturbing than Sarah had expected. The unknown species in the Outer Rim wasn't just expanding aggressively. They were systematically exterminating every other form of life they encountered. Entire ecosystems had been sterilized, leaving behind worlds that were completely lifeless except for the invaders themselves. They're not just conquering territory, Sarah said to Elena as they reviewed the data together. They're committing genocide on a galactic scale. That's the working theory, Elena agreed. But we don't know why. Their technology suggests they don't need resources or living space. They seem to be killing everything they encounter just because it exists. The images from the sterilized worlds were haunting. Cities that had been home to millions were now empty ruins. Forests that had taken millennia to grow were reduced to ash. Even the microbial life in the soil had been eliminated, leaving the worlds truly dead. How many civilizations have they destroyed? Sarah asked. At least 12 that we know of, Elena replied. Probably more that we haven't discovered yet. The expansion pattern suggests they're moving systematically through that region of space, leaving nothing alive behind them. Sarah studied the tactical data, trying to understand the alien strategy. They're not just random killers. This is organized, methodical. They have a plan. That's what makes them so dangerous, Elena said. Random violence can be contained. But this level of systematic destruction suggests they have capabilities and motivations that we don't understand. The next several weeks were the most intensive training Sarah had ever experienced. She learned to use weapons that could level city blocks, infiltration techniques that would allow her to pass for other species, and combat methods that had been developed specifically for fighting opponents with unknown capabilities. But the most disturbing part of her training was learning about the Alliance's previous attempts to deal with similar threats. She discovered that the peaceful, cooperative galactic civilization she had thought she was joining had a much darker history than she had realized. The Alliance maintains peace through the careful application of overwhelming force, Director Vex Prime explained during one of her tactical briefings. Most member species never see this because they are naturally peaceful and cooperative. But when aggressive species refuse to join voluntarily, measures are taken to ensure compliance. What kind of measures? Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. Complete elimination. In some cases, the director replied matter-of-factly. The galaxy is too dangerous to allow truly hostile species to develop advanced technology. Prevention is preferable to war. Sarah felt sick. You're talking about genocide. We prefer the term preemptive peacekeeping, Director Vex Prime said. The result is the same, but the motivation is protection of galactic civilization rather than conquest or hatred. And humans are being recruited for this because we're naturally violent? Sarah asked. Because you are naturally effective, the director corrected. Most Alliance species have moral inhibitions that prevent them from taking necessary action against hostile threats. Humans appear to be capable of setting aside such inhibitions when circumstances require it. As her training progressed, Sarah began to understand the full scope of what she was being prepared for. Applied violence operatives weren't just elite soldiers. They were the Alliance's answer to threats that couldn't be handled through normal diplomatic or military channels. 3 months into her training, she received her first real mission assignment. The Outer Rim situation has accelerated, Director Vex Prime announced during her final briefing. We are deploying a reconnaissance team to investigate one of the sterilized systems and gather intelligence on the hostile species. Sarah reviewed her mission parameters with growing apprehension. She would be part of a 3-person team infiltrating a system where 12 billion beings had been systematically murdered. Their goal was to gather information about the aliens' capabilities and, if possible, make contact to determine their intentions. What if they're not interested in communication? Sarah asked. Then, you eliminate any targets of opportunity and extract with whatever intelligence you can gather, the director replied. The Alliance must understand this threat before it spreads to more populated regions. The night before departure, Elena found Sarah in the facility's observation lounge, staring out at the asteroid field. Having second thoughts? Elena asked. Just trying to process everything I've learned, Sarah replied. When I joined the Academy, I thought I was going to serve the Alliance's mission of peace and cooperation. Now I find out that peace is maintained through preemptive genocide. Elena sat down beside her. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Sarah. The Alliance isn't perfect, but it's better than the alternative. Without some kind of organized civilization, species like the ones we're going to investigate would eventually destroy everything. And we're the ones who stop them? Sarah asked. We're the ones who do what needs to be done, Elena replied. Sometimes that means killing people who would otherwise kill millions. It's not pleasant, but it's necessary. Sarah thought about Earth's history of warfare and had to admit that Elena had a point. Sometimes violence was the only way to stop greater violence. But the casual way the Alliance discussed eliminating entire species still made her uncomfortable. What happens if we discover that these aliens are just trying to defend themselves? Sarah asked. What if their aggression is actually a response to something the Alliance did? Elena was quiet for a long moment before answering. Then, we report that information and let the Alliance leadership decide how to proceed. Our job isn't to make policy decisions. It's to gather intelligence and carry out operations. The next morning, Sarah found herself aboard another advanced shuttle, this time heading toward the Outer Rim territories, and her first real mission as an applied violence operative. As the shuttle entered hyperspace, she reflected on how much her life had changed since arriving at Sunspire Academy. She had come to the Academy as an idealistic young human hoping to serve the cause of galactic peace. Now she was a trained killer heading toward a mission that might involve first contact with a hostile alien species or assassination of targets the Alliance considered threatening. But, as disturbing as her transformation had been, Sarah had to admit that she felt more capable and confident than ever before. The training at Omega facility had pushed her beyond limits she hadn't known existed, and she now possessed skills and knowledge that made her a formidable opponent for any threat the galaxy might present. The Academy's dark secret had become her reality. She was no longer just representing humanity in the galactic community. She had become one of the weapons the Alliance used to maintain its version of peace. As the shuttle carried her toward whatever awaited in the Outer Rim, Sarah Chun, former cadet and current applied violence operative, prepared to discover what it really meant to be a Deathworlder in a galaxy that was far more dangerous than anyone had ever told her.